turn you off. That's a little bit on the bright side. We're live. Tonight we're going to talk about the video that I just posted today, which is the 372 big bore short stroke motor versus the 383, which is a smaller bore and a bigger stroke. So you guys let me know what you think. Which one of those would you pick? Do you want the big bore? We're obviously going to talk about that tonight. The interesting thing is that there are a couple things going on with this test. First of all, obviously, it's as usual, not an apples to apples test, because I didn't build them specifically for this test. It was just an interesting comparison more than anything else. They were very similar, same cam, almost the same compression. Cylinder heads flow were pretty close, both single plane intake manifolds, same carburetor, headers, and distributor, and all that stuff. One of them had the crank trigger on it, but that has no effect on power. So my question is, first of all, and this was the question in the video, is did any differences that we saw, were they a result of things that were different? One of the things that lots of people pointed to was there was a 2-degree change in lobe separation angle. And when you mentioned either dimpled ports or rod ratio or bore and stroke, like we're talking about tonight, or lobe separation angle, people come out of the woodwork. Oh yeah, 2 degrees of lobe separation angle will change it, like pick your number, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 foot-pounds, whatever the number is. So we got a lot of that. The other thing is, people were talking about rod ratio, even though I didn't mention the rod length. And I think both of these had 6-inch rods in them. But the people were talking about that, the shorter stroke and things like dwell time and, all the things that we normally talk about. And you guys know what my opinion is of this, is that if the displacement is the same, the power is going to be really close to the same. And we had a difference of, 11 cubic inches. And if you do the math on the specific horsepower and specific torque, that you'd see that they would be very, very comparable. I think, honestly, the difference in peak power had nothing to do with the bore and stroke. Not that I don't think that doesn't happen. I think it does. And I think that there's a reason why, professional levels of motorsports would choose, if they are given a displacement limit, would choose a combination of bore and stroke. In fact, we see that, and I was lucky enough to talk to some of the guys at Cosworth and various places, and talking to them about, in this case, we were talking about their cup motors, and the engine builders were saying, well, we do juggle things like bore and stroke for different tracks, which I thought was very interesting. But if you have a displacement limit, you people, and especially on a 2-valve motor, you would tend to pick the bigger bore and the shorter stroke. And usually it's not for the reason that people think. People think that, a shorter stroke, it'll rev. If you talk to any of the engine designers or builders for Formula One or any professional level, they'll tell you that the short block part of it, the short block part, it's like the crank and the rods and pistons, it's not hard to get that to rev. That's actually the easy part. Getting the valve train thing worked out that's usually the problem. So and that's at the very highest level of stuff. So I would still pick if I was building a motor and wanting to make it go fast at that level of stuff, I would pick the combination of bore and stroke that probably would allow me, anything that's available, because you can't, unless you're building an engine completely from scratch and you're designing it, and then you can make it whatever you want, then you want to pick it, you want to pick the bore and stroke. But a lot of times things like that are also done, like if you look at Formula One or other forms of racing, but particularly Formula One, they choose it also for packaging, so that you want the crank center line to be a specific spot. You want the weight to be a certain, as little as possible. They choose it for an aero package. There's lots of things that go into the design of the engine package. It's not just, maximum power, because obviously in a Formula One motor, you're looking not just for average peak or massive peak power. You're looking for the car has to accelerate so that it's going through an RPM range. They do a lot of that with gearing and stuff. But we can talk about that highest level of stuff, all the time, as much as we want. That would be fine. And I would pick that. at the level that we're looking at, the kinds of motors, these are street motors essentially, because both of these are, near 500 horsepower. That's essentially just a street motor. I just don't think you're going to see a big change in power differences were you to use everything the same. If the displacement was the same and the compression was the same and the cylinder head was the same and the intake manifold and the carburetor and everything, and then we get people that tell you, you have the wrong cam for the short stroke motor versus the bore motor. And I'm like, no, that's not really it. But if everything was the same, my opinion is that you would make almost identical power, because it's about displacement more than it is about the other things. That the bore and stroke thing is a little thing. The displacement is the big thing. The camshaft is a big thing. The cylinder head is a big thing. The compression is a big thing, bigger than the bore and stroke is, in my opinion. And so, and I'm talking about at this level down here, not the nth degree level, not Formula One stuff. So that's that's my opinion, and that's my opinion about a lot of different things. Keeping it in the level of the things that we're talking about, because this channel is designed for the 95% rule, where it's encompasses most of us, not the absolute, not guys running 50, 60, 100 pounds of boost, guys running 20 or something, and guys running street kinds of camshafts, 230 degrees or even a little bigger than that for stuff for guys that have valve reliefs and things. So in this range of things, the looking at those little tiny things, I would argue that it's not necessary, and it's not really beneficial in a cost or even time versus gain standpoint. The benefits just are not really there. If you have a choice, you can pick a 6-inch rod instead of a 5.7 rod, and the piston assembly, it's all the same price and stuff, then you could do that. The thing that you can't do is say, hey, look, I picked the 6-inch rod because it's going to make more power. Well, you don't know if it's going to do that, because you haven't run a direct back-to-back test. And as we've talked about, running a direct back-to-back test on something like that is near impossible, because you always have to change something else. And so then the scientists and people will go, well, yeah, but you also change the piston design and the pin height or the weight of the piston, all of these things. So I love putting these videos up. I love the bore and stroke thing is really good. I want to do a dedicated bore and stroke video where I go after an actual change in bore and stroke, where we use all the same stuff, where the compression's the same, the camshaft's the same, the intake the same, the headers, all of that stuff. I just need to figure out a way that I can get the biggest kind of change, and still have the same, I don't want to have custom pieces done. It's not worth that to me. It would have to be something that was readily available, where I could get a big swing and not have to spend $1 million, because I don't have the budget to do that kind of stuff. So I would like to do the test. I would like to compare that. Rod ratio would be another interesting thing. Something I think I could do on a forward. You could do a 509 and a 5.4 rod or something and see. But again, you're changing the piston design. So what's going to happen there? I don't know. Let's see. Got to have a poll though, right? Okay, so we'll see how people are doing tonight. A bigger bore short stroke will pare it down to get the number of characters right. A big bore short stroke will always make more horsepower than the opposite if everything else is the same. So let's see what people have to say. I just got done building some shelves. I was actually working in my garage, which is cool. I like working with wood too. It smells a lot better than working with greasy junkyard motors. But I had to move some stuff around and build some shelving, which was cool. I like doing it, but what I like even more, and I like doing this with automotive stuff too, like when I'm at West Tech, like my L angle. People freaked out about that. That's not L angle. It's just angle. It's, okay. Just like it's not 400M. It is a 400M. It is to me. And it will continue to be that, just like L angle will be L angle. But I like building things with the things that I have available. So I had built Milo a ramp, a wooden ramp that attached to my tailgate out of things that I had here. And he used it and it worked good. But it's too big and cumbersome to be carrying around and stuff. And it mostly just sat. Now I'm just picking him up. Now he doesn't even want to get in the back as much. He does sometimes. He likes riding in the front more now. But so that's been sitting there. So I thought, you know what? We need to do something with that. But I don't want to throw away all the wood because it's got a lot of good stuff on it. It's, it's got 2x4s and it's got plywood and stuff. So I looked over our shelving and I'm like, well, that's metal shelving. And I don't have the rest of the metal shelvings with the hooks and everything to go in there. I said, but I do have that. And I can make that into a shelf right over here with all the things that I have. And so you just figure out, hey, look, I just got to do this and this and this. And then that bolts to that. And that's all good. And so I like making things like that. And that's like the mount for the blower. I also want to point out in the video of the AMR 500, you can see, I think on the second video where we're watching it run after we did it was after I did the change in the inlet and outlet size. We had to take the blower off and put the blower back on to replace those. And when we put it back on, one thing I didn't do, and this is why you see the belt walk over the edge of the pulleys, is when I did it to begin with, when the blower was mounted on there with the stock inlet and outlet, I took a straight edge piece of aluminum that's flat-ish, and then lined up the pulleys, and then I held the blower in place and then bolted down the 4 mounting points so that the belt is in line correctly, and it worked perfect. Then when I took it off and put it back on, I didn't use my Super Richie belt alignment tool. I just put it on there, and it didn't dawn on me until after I saw it doing that, oh, hey, look, that's a problem. That's not a consequence. That's not even really belt slippage. That's pulley misalignment. And then, so it's fairly easy to fix. You just have to unbolt it and move it out of the way. And so that's some more behind the scenes stuff of what's going on. So we'll see what you guys got going on tonight. So hopefully you guys are doing some cool stuff. I'm really excited. I see 1 Liter Mafia's in the house. I'm very, very excited about the prospect of running the Sprint motor. And it might be easier than I think. I need to put a call into Steve. I think they're filming Engine Masters right now. And I need to put a call into Steve tomorrow and ask him if it might not be easier to run the little Sprint motor on the DTS dyno than it would be on the Superflow. If I do the Superflow, I have to make an adapter plate to mount that to a Chevy bell housing or the V6 bell housing or some one of the bell housings that's existing. If I mount it to the DTS, the DTS / Superflow dyno, the Power Mark dyno, then I just need to make what is a mounting plate, and then just bolts to that. That's pretty simple. That's one pattern instead of multiple patterns. And then you just make a coupler to mount to the crankshaft that goes to the flexible U joint. So if there's a little bit of misalignment, it kind of takes that up. And then I think also that the DTS might be happier running something that's, sub 100 horsepower, be way sub 100 horsepower NA. So that would be cool. And I would love to run that thing. I'd like to run it NA, but that's going to be about 50 horsepower. I don't know how low we can go. We might be able to do that on that motor, on that dyno. but then run it with a turbo, run it with that blower, and then run it with both, because you got to have a compound. And then the nice thing about the compound, that will allow me to do, and I have a turbo upgrade for it, that will allow me to do a turbo upgrade and then have it not be laggy, boost it up. We could put a big 55 millimeter turbo on the 1 liter motor. That'd be, that's facetious. That turn the big bore at high RPM. Yeah, that's simple cylinder walls with the rear main seal ratio. That's right. That all important rear main seal ratio. That bigger is better. That's what a lot of people put. They're like, why don't you just use the bore from the 372 and the stroke from the 383 and just stop fooling around and just make a bigger motor? Yeah. NASCAR put a max bore diameter of 4185. Otherwise, manufacturers would be de-stroking big blocks to make 358s. Yeah. That would be nice, because then you could have 500 or 600 CFM heads that you would use on there. Turbo freaks and car peaks and peeps and motor geeks. Bigger bore, less shrouding of the valves. What if the valves are not shrouded already? What if you? So here's my question, because the valve shrouding is something that comes up always, and it should, because that's a real thing. But let me ask you this question: let's suppose we had 2 cylinder heads, and we flowed them, one of them on a 4030 bore, and the other one on a 4125 bore, and they flowed the same. What if the valve was already flowing its maximum, was already unshrouded because of the chamber design, and a bigger bore didn't do anything? So then would the bigger bore benefit from more airflow? James, what's up? You should test a 4.6 against a 5.4 with everything from the deck up the same, compression the same, to see if stroke really doesn't work on the modular Ford. But that's changing displacement, right? The 5.4 is definitely going to make more power than a 4.6. Let's build a small bore, long stroke, short rod and see what it runs like. So that would be a stock 5.3, right? Small bore, long stroke. I guess it doesn't really have a short rod, but Burns, I'm sorry to hear that happened, but I'm happy to see that he's doing better. Jared, I don't know what you mean by thoughts. Chevy 302 versus a Ford 302, but those would be different motors, though. Isn't that what he's talking about? Doesn't a 305 have more stroke and a smaller bore, and a 302 have a big bore and short stroke? Yeah, and if you look at a stock TunePort 305 and a stock HO 302, they make the same power. Not only that, they make it at the same RPM. That's what I'm talking about. In the normal range of stuff, it's the displacement, and the Chevy has 5 more cubic inches. In the normal range of stuff, the less power the motor makes, the less that makes a difference. Please excuse me, I had to vote yes again. I couldn't get the no on my phone again. What's cheap and easier to find, a 350 block or a 400 block? Looks like a 383. Yeah, that's the thing. One of those was a dart block, which you would pick because it's a dart block, and that motor in particular, because that thing's had a million pulls on it, and it keeps going and going and going. But if you were to try to duplicate that, you'd either have to have an aftermarket block or you'd have to find a 400 block. An aftermarket block is going to be money if they have it in stock. A 400 block is just going to be hard to find. Need 8 AMR 500s. That was originally the plan for me. I don't know if I'm going to do that, but I have a design for it, but what cam and compression to get 350 horsepower out of a small block Chevy 302 with Vortec heads and an RPM air gap? How is it you have a 302 small block Chevy? Is it do you have a 3-inch stroke small block? And why are you doing that? But 350 horsepower out of a Vortec head is going to be able to support that. So probably like a 224, 232 cam. Richard, if I'm upgrading a 78 305 with an RV cam, lifters, and springs, do I need to change push rods too? You might. I don't know what the base circle of that cam is. And I don't know if are your push rods hardened? Do you have guide plates? If I'm adding springs, should I rebuild the heads and enlarge the valves? I don't know how much more. I don't know what the valves are on a 78 305 head. But I think guys go up to, did they go up to a 194 or something on those? I don't know what that 78 305 head's going to have in it. Bigger valves could help. Or just, you're doing a lot. You could just go get a 350 from the wrecking yard. Off topic, but I have an old flathead 5 horsepower Briggs and Stratton and a flathead 10 horsepower Tecumseh, and they have the same deck height almost, but the Tecumseh has a piston bigger than my Honda. So are they different displacements then? Need a GT35 feeding the MR 500? Yeah, I think that's a little bit of a mismatch. That's a 500 or 600 horsepower turbo feeding 150 horsepower blower. $8,600 RPM from an LS is in the valve train. Agreed. It doesn't matter what the displacement is. They'll all go to that RPM. They will if you have a stable cam profile and the right rockers and springs. "25 years ago, Richard, I built a small block with a 4155 bore and a 3250 stroke, 5.7 rod, dart 220 heads, 625 lift, solid roller. What block did you use that you went to a 4155 on? Why don't they have eBay centrifugal superchargers? The guys from Speedmaster did centrifugal superchargers. They copied Vortec, I think, or something. I thought I remember seeing those. I've never tried one. Tim, what's going on? Just want to see the effect of stroke on a 4.6 taken to the extreme to prove that a stroke. Yeah, more stroke will add power. Change of discipline. Marine application, 18,000 pound twin engine cabin cruiser. Need monster torque down low, 4-inch stroke, and a 5.3 possible. 500 foot-pounds below 3,000. Let's see what we did on. I don't think the 383 did that. I think it only did that like near the peak. Cathedral Port, let's see. Yeah, at 3,000, that's going to be a really tall order. Yeah, I think you're going to be 460 or something. 450 maybe. Okay. Crotch 54 should build a 1-inch bore, 8-inch stroke engine. Admiral, you want to prove that a 4.6 is better than a regular 4.6? It is. A bigger motor is going to make more power. It's not just on a 4.6, but on every engine family that you would test that on. So Shadow, what were we doing? Oh, your AC compressor. A 283 small block Chevy versus a 289 small block Ford shootout. I don't have either one of those motors now. Westech has run a couple of 283s, and I've run a couple of 289s. They're both like sub 300 horsepower motors. Gen 1 Hemi stuff? I've never run a Gen 1 Hemi. Oh, Eric, you have an L99 crank in it? ITBs with 8 AMRs. Like to see a board and stroke test. You were talking about, would it be important to get the rods and pistons the same weight? Well, you would try to, but I don't think you can. I mean, if you're dramatically changing the stroke length, you're going to be changing the rod length. And if you manage to get the change in stroke length and then run the same rod, you're going to have wildly different piston designs. I have not put a 4.3 crank in an LT1, not yet. Can you put a 283 crank in a 327 block? Yes, depending on, and they have bearing spacers to do that depending on whether it's a small journal or a large journal. The Backstreet Boys are back? .283 small journals. In NA forum, would you pick a 416 aluminum block or a 427 iron block? What is it you're trying to do? Are you road racing where weight is a serious issue? And if you are you picking a 416 factory block, and how much power are you trying to make out of it? If it's more than 1,000, I would go with an iron block. Oscar, I don't know about any legal mods for your LS3. I'm not familiar with things that people have done that would be. I don't think I've ever done a search on emissions legal stuff. Bow tie blocks are going for 455. That's what I was wondering. I was wondering what block he used. It had to be in some kind of aftermarket one. A Rodeck aluminum block. My 72 400 block is 30. How can you go more than 30 on a 400 block? I didn't think you could go very far on those. You feed your station wagon Mustangs. Must be Mustang 2s. Oh, that's right. Shots fired. There are guys who have gotten 400 cubic inches from 5.4s. That when they did the Engine Masters stuff, the guys did that. I want to build a 262 small block with a 400 crank. Milo blames the squirrels. That's actually the little ones barking. Milo's just laying down. Looks like guys doing horsepower per cubic inch in comp engine builds seem to be won by guys around the 402 mark. What engine competition are you talking about? Ouch, Dan. I like the old Powerdyne superchargers because they were quiet. The old belt-driven ones. Marquis, is that? Did I pronounce that right? Well, thanks for watching. Kenny, your thoughts are that it will breathe better. I don't remember which combination that was. How much power do you think is lost with only 3/4 throttle on a 305? My kickdown cable ran out of travel. It was keeping me from full throttle. At low horsepower outputs, not very much. There's been any real racers that have compound supercharger into the turbo. So you're having the blower feed the turbo. Anyone see the two-stroke horizontally opposed piston engines with two cranks and the pistons firing at each other? Yeah, Dan, I remember seeing the two-stroke diesels. They were turbo and supercharged, but were they just using the supercharger on the evacuation side or something? Christian watching gallons per hour meter with twin 350s hertz. Yeah. Are you talking about the Gen 1 Hemi or the Gen 2 Hemi? Because the Gen 1 is the real early one, right? The Gen 2 is the 426. The Gen 1 is the 330 and 350 cubic inch ones. Oh, if I do a 283 Chevy and a 289 Ford, I have to do a 289 Studebaker and a 290 AMC. Is the 289? I thought the Studebakers used Ford motors in them. I'm not a Studebaker guy though. James, the 5.4 is a taller deck than the 4.6 is. So just changing the stroke alone, would you dramatically increase the horsepower or torque? You would increase both because horsepower and torque are related. Anytime you change the displacement, whether you change it with stroke length or bore, when you change that, think about this. If you're making 1 horsepower per cubic inch out of your 350 and you make it a 400 and you're making 1 horsepower per cubic inch, and now you're going to make 400 horsepower instead of 350. That assumes a few things in there, but you get the idea. GMC uses a supercharger just as a blower to get the air through the engine. That's what I thought. Isn't that what it was being used as in the Detroit diesel stuff too? They've done 60 over 400s. Yeah, the head gasket area is thin, but I'm wondering about how thick the bores are, how thick the sleeves are. Wisconsin's in the house. Working on the Ravelette. Nice. Leave the Pinot staying alone. Hey, I want a King Cobra. You don't necessarily need a 4-inch forged 4-inch crank and a 282, or is that supposed to be 383 stroker? After doing what we've done with the cast cranks on LSs, I on street applications, I wouldn't put a forged crank in anything anymore. As talked about last night, the 351 block is 50 pounds heavier than the 302. The good news is the new wheels and tires are 44 pounds lighter, which is even better because that is unsprung weight. It's also rotational weight. There's always somebody out there who pushed the board another 10 thousandths. Just right till you get to air or water in that case. Like the video of the 400M, yeah, that was really popular. People like that other guy's thing. Another question: if the max bore on an LS block is 3902, we've gone 3905 on them. I recently picked up a pair of 354 Hemis, one with dual quads. That's cool. That's what I do like about a lot of those older motors, like that Pontiac that I have. They did multiple carbs on a lot of that stuff. Yeah, Dan, that's one I was thinking of, is the Avanti with the Paxton supercharger on it. Richard, you're supposed to tell me the 305 was going to be a beast now. Yeah, definitely get wide open throttle because you're only making 3/4 of the horsepower. Gen 1 Hemis 331, 354, 392. Have a nice running 307 in my pickup. 289 Studebaker is a different animal. It became a 304 before they went to Chevy in Canada. And a 273 Mopar. %70 island of the map, practically no boost. How hard is it to get forged rods and pistons for a 400M? The rod might be a little difficult because it's pretty long. The piston that we use, we might have just reused the factory one. I can't remember, or we used a Cleveland piston. But who's the guy that has the stroker stuff? He might have forged rods for the stock stroke length. Who's the guy that does all the 400M stroker stuff? When you're softening the chambers, the chamber sweeps in at an angle. I feel like Dulcich and Freiberger now. You cut your kick down. It's not an M. That's right. Christian, thank you very much. Did you have a question? The only reason a big bore could make more power is because you have more head choices, but you don't on this. That's the thing on a small block Chevy. You don't have more head choices because you do on some other things like a 305. But if this is already a 4-inch bore on a 383 versus a 4125 bore, you probably arguably would have fewer engine or head options on a 4125 bore, at least ones that would match the chamber size. So when you bore a 4.8 to LS1 piston, then you have a direct comparison to a 5.3 with different bore and stroke. Yeah, we've thought about that. I didn't know if that was enough of a change, though. Kevin, you like the Indy AMC SR401 block? I haven't done any AMC stuff. Thanks for your wisdom. I work swing shift. It can never seem to catch your live stream. Well, see, you're here now. Richard, do you have a carb scoop or K&N air filter for a Dominator for sale? Like an air cleaner assembly? I don't think I have any Dominator stuff. Were you doing other guys with a GM 2-liter LTG? No, that's an Ecotech motor. Your 3/4 throttle only works with 3/4 cams, 3/4 race cam. Myers, that's who the people that do the 400. Corella will make you any size rod you want. I got a lot of custom stuff done when we were doing these import engines from the guys at Potter, and they did a good job, and the turnaround was pretty fast. Richard, you should pick up a 502 Magnum Mercury manifold. TMR stroker, yep. Can you give me a good 5.3 stroker combo? Yeah, if you take a look up at the channel, I have lots of 5.3s that we put together, all sorts of different ones, from nearly stock all the way up to one of the 383s made 600. So there's lots of good stuff up there. Richard, you need to dyno test a Japanese V8. Yep. I have some Japanese inline 6-cylinders that I need to dyno. Softening the chamber makes it like a low angle Hemi. No, not like a Hemi at all. A Hemi's a terrible combustion chamber. Uh, 5.3 iron block. There's lots of combos up there from stock all the way up to 1,300 horsepower with turbos on them. Yeah, Dan, it only has 12 lobes. Well, it only has 12 good ones. Why would people de-stroke a small block Chevy to 377 instead of building a 427? Because the de-stroke, man, where you been? A 427, though, you're going to put a 4-inch stroke at that? That gets problematic with small block Chevys with cam to rod clearance, rod bolt clearance. I mean, it's not. I mean, it can be done, but it's work. Jay-Z versus the Atlas. T. Meyer, how much were the aftermarket heads for the 400M? The 400M just uses Cleveland heads. There's lots of Cleveland heads available. The ones that we use, I think, were from Speedmaster, but Bryce, from when he was doing Dr. J's, I think he did those heads. But Edelbrock and Trick Flow and lots of people have Cleveland heads now. What heads can you run on a 267 small block Chevy with a 3500 bore? The stock ones or ported stock ones, probably. A Merlin P51 engine. .366 big block Chevy, the one of the truck motors. Admiral, I don't know any of the later V6 things. Don't know anything about them. I couldn't even tell you. I couldn't even list them, I don't think. Andy, right? Other than an LV3 or an LV1. I do know that one because we've run that. Somebody keeps throwing in, when we talk about the LV3, they keep throwing in the high feature 3.6. I think I've seen a couple of those at the wrecking yards, but I've never run one. 702-inch V12 GMC. I did see one of those V6s. I don't remember what size it was. I showed it in one of the wrecking yard videos that I did way back, and I saw it at the one that's by Westech. I wish I would have gotten that 348W motor with a 4-speed trans. And you have 2 of the GMCs. What do you do with those? Is a Jeep stroker crank worth it for off-road? It'll make more torque. Does the long stroke small bore combo impact flame travel? Well, the bigger bore would be the thing that would impact flame travel, right? It'd have to travel farther. You probably knew what to do with them. Those are big and cumbersome, right? And they take up a lot of room. The whole point of a bigger board is to get more valve area relative to displacement without having to deal with as much shrouding. So, you may have not been here earlier when we were talking about it. So everybody brings up valve shrouding. My question is, and I ask this because I've done this and this has happened before. So we've run cylinder heads on the flow bench because I've done lots of flow testing. And we run a cylinder head on like a 4030 bore, and then we flow test it. And then we run on a 4125 bore. What happens if it doesn't make any more flow on a 4125 bore? Does the bigger bore still get more power because it's unshrouding the valves when it didn't show any more airflow? What happens if that happens? Does it not gain that power? Conversation piece. You have two. You can have two conversations then, right? They weigh 1,500 pounds. That's a lot. Joe, yeah, the LT1 or the 5.3 L83. In fact, we had one that made a lot more power than 499 horsepower. We had one that made 550 or 560. So it made a lot more than the LS does. The LT makes more power than an LS does if you have equal stuff on it. Part of the reason for that, and we talked about that, is that the direct injection helps that. Variable cam helps that. It has lots more compression. The thing about the cylinder head is that it's only flowing air. It's not also flowing fuel. So that's part of the extra gain that you get. And then, like you said, variable cam timing. How many AMR 500s would it take to make 600 horsepower? It'd take at least 4 of them, but you'd be better off having more. Richard, would you ever consider building a big bore short stroke, big block Chevy? Freiburger's already done that. They've already done, it probably was a 4.5-inch bore and a 3.760 stroke. I'll have to go back and look at the Engine Master stuff. Let's say you built a 377 with a decent cam and they built a 400 with the same cam. Wouldn't the 400 make more? It would make more everywhere, yeah. Got to unshroud the valves more with a cutter. Have you seen the newest edition, the 8.8 PSI motors? I have seen them, yeah. An Oldsmobile 350 diesel block. What's a flow ball, Dan? I don't know what that is. I've never used that. So do you think that with a given valve size, that making the chamber bigger, that the flow will always go up? I don't think it will. I think if you have a big valve and you have an adjacent chamber wall, that certainly could happen. But you could also have a situation where it's far enough away from that wall where making that wall, laying that wall back doesn't do anything. No, in the Oldsmobile diesel block. If an intake port flows better when it only flows dry air, does that also hold true to the intake manifold? The flow rate should go up if it's only flowing air. Have a 400 block that needs a crank. Where would you source a crank to hold 400 to 500 horsepower? Is this a 400M or a 400 small block? Either one of those, I would just get a cast crank for it for 500 horsepower. Any plans to get super ported E7T ES from Visor? I think David Vizard's time for porting heads is probably over. I don't think he's going to be interested in porting iron heads. I'll have to look and see what flow balls are. I've never tried them. Forever you use a short stroke big block Chevy for a short versus long connecting rod test. I thought so. Couldn't we just do that with a dial bore or mic or something to see where the valve, where the chamber wall is closest to the valve? That's what we did on the 5.3 when I did the chamber work on that, which did show gain. So we're going to go to live chat now because I think I'm down at the bottom, right, right in time to leave. A big bore short stroke will always make more horsepower than the opposite of everything is the same. 50, we're split exactly 50-50, and that's a perfect place to close the poll. My buddy just ported stock iron Buick 455 heads that flow 330. Nice. That's good flow. There you go. 8 gets the always points for that. Strings you're using when running the flow bench. Yeah, the strings I'm familiar with. I use the same yarn that they use in Ford versus Ferrari on Ken Miles GT40. Big 455 is underrated. Other guys, that we'll see a test of a stage 1 before too long on that. Foreign small block previous build has AFR heads, rev to 7,000, stock rods, crank developed a crack. Feels like it needs forged now. Okay. I mean, it shouldn't be hard to find a 375 stroke crank. Scat has them. Everybody has them. You have to know in the words there. That's right. Always and never. 455 Buick, big bore, short stroke. But here's the thing: a 455. What is a 455 Buick famous for? Being a big bore and short stroke motor. But what is it famous for? If you talk to any Buick Stage 1 GS owner, what are they going to tell you? What are they going to quote? They're going to, if you try to tell them, oh, an LS6 Chevelle makes more power, which it does. But what are they going to tell you? Yeah, but the Buick makes more torque because it was rated at 510 foot-pounds, I think, instead of 500. We knew the unshrouding stuff was really went from 202 to 2055s. And then did you guys go to 208s also? I thought David already sold his E7s. Yep, it was. It was definitely known for torque. Big bore making all that torque. Which one has the potential to make more power? A big block Mopar 400 or a small block Chevy? I don't know what I honestly don't know. I know that a big block Mopar cylinder head is not very good. It's about what a small block head is. but I think it's probably better than the small block head on a 400 though. $45 owner is going to say the Buick GSX was the quickest factory produced muscle car ever. Yep. Grand National, yeah. Again, a Grand National, also a torque motor. Yeah, 383, 400, the Mopars, even a 440, that's what hurt them, is that they didn't have enough head flow. At least the big block Chevy had decent head flow. I talked to Oliver not long ago. I'm going to try to do some more stuff with him. I'm going to maybe buy some stuff from him so I can get this 280Z motor in the Z. But he's got the Nova running with the small block in it, and he has a different transmission in it too. Peanut ports, yeah. Peanut ports for the win. Yeah, Dan, that's true. A 426 Hemi has lots and lots of flow and lots of port volume. And if you want to talk about heavy cranks and rods and pistons, the Hemi stuff is really heavy. Seen some fast 455 Buicks, but he just built one that made 872 horsepower out of a 455. That's a lot. Mopar is still my star. I'd have a 440 over Hemi for drag racing. I remember people talking about, but the 440 was better because the Hemis would come out of tune, and I don't understand. What would happen with a Hemi? It had way more cylinder head than a 440 did. Watch the Bro Charger full episode. I know I searched and found a 6-rib pulley for it, so I'm going to order that up tonight and get the 6-rib pulley. And then I talked to the guy in Sweden, and I can send it over. He also is going to get me lots and lots of data because they've flow tested everything, all of the blowers, so going all the way back to the M90 stuff. So we have M90, M112, 122, the 2650, the 2.3, all of the, I don't know if I'm gonna have to see if he's flowed. I'll have to ask him if he flowed like a 1.9 liter LSA blower. Kenny Bell did do a blower kit for LS stuff, although they didn't really want to get into that market. And I don't understand. It's way bigger than the Ford market, but they did an LSA blower upgrade. And so I wonder if they ever flowed that factory 1.9 liter blower. A tall deck is going to be a tall deck big block is going to be a problem with intake manifold stuff. Best factory small block muscle car was the 340. The 340 didn't have a good cylinder head either. The one thing that helped the 340, at least in 68, was it had a good sized camshaft. But a 340 didn't have cylinder heads like a Boss 351 did, or even a 302. Yeah, X or J heads, a 340 6-pack head, or even the non 6-pack head stuff. I think that the 68 with a big cam in it probably would make more than a 6-pack would, I think. And honestly, I'd like to see what a 360, what the Little Red Wagon, what is that, an E58? What that 360 would make compared to those 340s. I know it's low compression, but it has a good cam in it. It has a head, it has an intake manifold, it has a carburetor, and it has more displacement. The nice thing about the Mopars is that the cars were pretty light. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do the 360 with more compression. I just would want to do a stock versus stock. My 86 Daytona Z was a Mustang Slayer. People talk an awful lot about Mustangs, but they won a lot of races. A big block challenge, 460 Ford, 454 Chevy, and a 440 Dodge. If you took the best stock version of all of those, the Chevy would make more power. It has the best cylinder head. Although they didn't ever put a Super Cobra Jet or even a Cobra Jet head on the 460 that I'm aware of. But like a 68, 69 460 was rated at about 370, I think. But, if you look at a big block Chevy, it's rated 100 horsepower higher than that. Not an LS7 because that's not a factory motor, but an LS6 certainly. Or I guess people would argue that a 427 big block, the 427 guys will tell you that, it was originally rated at 450 and they derated it to 425 because they don't like it that the 454 made more power. I don't understand it, but an L88 certainly would be one, a ZL1, but those are all specialty things. But I think an LS6 would make more than the hottest 440, like a 446 pack, if that's the hottest one, or hotter than any 460 Ford. .460 because it's 6 higher. That's right. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. Please go watch the video on bore versus stroke so you guys can comment and tell Richard how he has no idea what he's talking about. 460. See, Mark Sanchez is a 429 guy, and I keep trying to tell him, look, a 460 is bigger. It's going to make more. But, I've never run the hottest factory 460 versus like a 429 Super Cobra Jet. So I don't know. I don't know how that would turn out. We'll have to see. I will see you guys all tomorrow.